Welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast with Scott McKenzie. Scott is a passionate industry professional dedicated to transferring cutting-edge, industry-focused innovations and trends while highlighting the men and women who keep the world moving. So put on your hard hat, grab your work boots, and let's go.
And again, thank you very much for joining the Industrial Talk Podcast, the number one industrial and manufacturing-related podcast in the universe. That is my story. That is what I'm sticking to. And it is solely dedicated to celebrating you, the industrial and manufacturing professionals, the companies that get it done. You are bold. You are brave. You dare greatly. You innovate. Boy, do you innovate. And you're changing the world, and you're changing lives. You're changing my life. And that's what's important. And thank you very much for what you do. Is it getting old, or is it just me that we just here on the Industrial Talk Podcast have great interviews? This one is lengthy. However, it highlights two titans of data. One by the name of Bill SCHMARZO, and the other one by the name of Kirk Borne. SCHMARZO, of course, is the Chief Innovation Officer at Hitachi Vantara. And Kirk, he's got a lengthy title. I'm looking out on a stat card on LinkedIn. It's the Principal Data Scientist and Data Scientist Fellow and Executive Advisor at Booz Allen Hamilton. Now, you go out there, you're going to look at his stat card, and you're going to say, holy schmoly, 30,000 limit. He's already got 30,000 followers. This guy's a machine. Let's get going with this interview on the Titans of Data. Okay, so I'm living the dream. This was a spectacular interview. And you're going to say to yourself, Scott, it's pretty long. It is. I will cut it up. But for now, just go out to the industrialtalk.com, right? Industrialtalk.com. Find the player. Click on the little speed button, and you can speed it up. And although you're saying to yourself, it's pretty doggone long, you have no idea the amount of just incredible, insightful content that exists in this particular podcast. I've always been one that just says, hey, you got to innovate. You've got to figure this stuff out. And now is the time to truly, truly learn, to dedicate your time, your free time, to learning more about what is happening in the industrial and manufacturing world today. These two gents are at the cutting edge. They are absolutely spectacular. And so we took a little bit of a different approach. And, some people are saying, I'm not sure about data. There might be a little squishy or wishy-washy on the power of data. But what we're going to do in this particular podcast, what we did was we talked a little bit about the positives power behind data analytics, as well as the impact on business and culture, right? And I took the position that I'm going to challenge them. And then they take the position of defending their position, right? And so it's just steeped in doggone value. I'm just died. And what I tried to do as I edited this particular podcast, try to cut it up a little bit. I'm going to have to do that after the fact, just because it flows, and it just keep on talking. And who says data analytics is not fun? Those two gents, passionate, big time, passionate, big time. Now, we're going to do a couple of things on business here. Let me just pull something up here, because I want to make sure you get this on your calendar. Now, there are a couple events that I want you to consider and put on your calendar, and it is sponsored by Hitachi Vantara. The first one is called Manage, Delivering on Bottom Line, Realize the Economic Value of Data. Now, that's brought to you by Bill SCHMARZO. He's going to be the speaker, and you're going to have the links out there, so you don't have to, if you want to write it down, you can write it down, but it's going to be out on Industrial Talk on there, the particular podcast. September 23rd, at 1 p.m., and it looks like the time zone's Denver, so Mountain Time. Make a note of it. I'm going to put that registration link out there. And the other one is Manage Speed Discovery, Comprehension, and Trust in Data at Scale. long title. I am sure that it's going to have tremendous value, right? And that is September 15th, and that's 4:30 p.m. This is London time now. Just go out there. You're going to have the registration, but you've got to be, and big time, committed to the fact that you've got to learn, and you got to keep on learning because it is so important. Now, the next event I want to bring your attention to, so you got those two that are being provided by Hitachi Vantara. Important. Get engaged. Reach out. The next event that I want to bring your attention to, and this was brought to you by Colorado University and Cap Logistics. And one of the things, fortunately for me, when I had the opportunity to go up to Northeast Ohio, manufacturing or interviewing a lot of manufacturers, some of the things that they talked about was, of course, their supply chain and how COVID had interrupted or modified their supply chain. Here's a great webinar called Adapting to COVID Virus Supply Chain Disruptions, brought to you by those Colorado University as well as Cap Logistics, and they're going to be just nailing it. And you're going to find out some solutions on supply chain. Great group of people that are going to be into that. So you got a couple of things that you need to put down on your calendar and make it happen. Oh, by the way, this particular webinar, it's going to be out there, the link, so don't worry about it. September 16th, 12 p.m. That's Mountain Time. So they're all over the place, right? All this time, but you'll get it once you register for the event. It's all good. So we got to be about learning. So don't push that off. More so than ever, okay? All right, I want to make sure that you understand. This is a lengthy podcast. It's chock full of great stuff. You can fast forward. You have the power to do that. You can compress it. You can just go out to Industrial Talk or go out to all of the podcast platforms that the Industrial Talk is on and just fast forward through it. But you've got to listen to Bill and Kirk talk about data, the positive impact of that data, not just from a business perspective, but from a cultural perspective and where it's going. I mean, you could be nervous or you can get engaged. You can embrace it or you can run away. I honestly and just recommend that you begin embracing it and just enjoy what this is all about. All right, let's get on with it. Enough me yammering. So here we are. This is Bill SCHMARZO and Kirk Bourne. Enjoy this data conversation. All right, Kirk and Bill, welcome to the Industrial Talk podcast. You listeners out there, what we've got are titans of data. I'm not sure if that's a superhero or whatever, but titans of data. I like it, and you guys deserve it. All right, for the listeners out there, Kirk, give us a little 411, a little background on who you are, where you come from, outside of the fact that we had a heck of a conversation pre-video, and you're much better than Bill.
Well, whatever happens today, remember the Titans. That's all I can say. Anyway, so I don't know if you can keep that in the recording, but anyway, so my name's Kirk Borne. I'm currently the principal data scientist and an executive advisor at Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a global technology consulting firm. And I am the principal data scientist, but I'm not the only data scientist. We have over 2,000 data scientists doing work all across the federal government sector and cybersecurity in the commercial sector. And so how do I get there? Well, my background is astrophysics, so obviously I belong there, right? Well, no, my background is astrophysics, but I spent 20 years at NASA as an astrophysicist, but my day job, which paid the bills, was running data systems for astronomy space missions for NASA. So I was always working with data systems. So I would say I was doing data at night and data at day, right, as an astronomer.
Look at you.
And so I just, that was 20 years of handling data, doing discovery from data, working with data, analyzing data, making data available to other people. And about 22 years ago, thereabouts, the data sets that we were working with just grew astronomically in size. And that's supposed to be a joke. Our astronomical data sets grew astronomically. But the reality was that they really did. We went from 15, we were archiving data from NASA space missions. We had 15,000 experiments of data that totaled altogether 15,000, less than 1 terabyte. And then in one day, we were offered a new single experiment, which had over 2 terabytes of data. So we went from 15,000 to 15,001 experiments, and we had to triple the capacity of the data center to store
what
that.
Year was that? What year was that? Just
that was 1997.
Shit.
23 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, so at that point, I realized something was dramatically different with what was going on in the world. And the volume of data in astronomy was growing enormously. And then as I started looking around, I started seeing the same thing was happening in other sciences. Because I was in science, I focused on the sciences. It was happening in other sciences. And then before long, we realized it was happening in the commercial sector and the government sector and everywhere. And so I asked myself, what can one do with all this? And I discovered machine learning and data science.
Yep.
But in those days, we called it data mining. So I basically discovered the field of data mining. And the fancy term for data mining in those days was knowledge discovery and databases, KDD, which I like because my initials are KDB. So it's just sort of. So I started digging into that and learning about it. And being a scientist and a mathematician at heart, I just fell in love with it because it was just really cool things to do with math and data that I never saw before. And I've been doing that ever since for the last 2 decades with a 12-year stint in between NASA and Booz Allen as a university professor. I was a professor of astrophysics at George Mason University for 12 years, but I never actually taught astrophysics courses. I taught data science courses.
So you got a mad data street cred out there. That's the summation of that. And by the way, listeners, he is an LSU Tiger fan. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
All right.
I'm not just a fan, I'm an alumnus.
That's even better. Now
all my whole family.
Now it stinks to be you, Bill, to have to follow that. But Bill, follow that. Give us a little 411 on your background too.
Sure. Well, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Hitachi Vantara. And Hitachi Vantara is the digital arm of Hitachi. And background-wise, I also teach at the University of San Francisco and at the National University of Ireland in Galway, which is really the best part of what I do. I find teaching, much like coaching, to be exhilarating. And I spent quite a bit of my time doing coaching and sports. So I like that. And my interest in data and analytics probably started when I was, 10 or 11 years old, and I discovered the game Stratomatic baseball, Stratomatic basketball.
Are you kidding me? You just dropped the Stratomatic?
I've got 2 boxes in the garage here.
I have never met anybody outside of my buddies. We used to play baseball, Stratomatic baseball. Tried football, liked the baseball better.
Basketball became my real favorite one.
No.
Because I cheated. I would take the cards, and because I had kind of a head for statistics, I could look at a card and figure out which players were actually the best. And so I gravitated towards the Lakers that had Wilt Chamberlain on it, because he didn't double team Wilt Chamberlain. He would score every time. He was unstoppable, which of course he double teamed him. It left Happy Harrison, Gail Goodrich, and Jerry West wide open for jumpers, which they made if unguarded all the time. And so all the neighbors could never figure out, how come we never can beat Schmarzo, right? Because I had the best team and the best combinations of players on the court at all times. So yeah, I became kind of this data analytics, and I realized that if you really understood data and analytics, it gave you a huge advantage, which really for me came to life in the book Moneyball, which is really to me brought together all the cybermetrics and everything sort of comes together around the concept of Moneyball. So I like analytics. I'm not a fan of data. I'm not. I'm a fan of analytics, and I endure data because it's the fuel for me to do analytics. But and I've just been doing data and mostly analytics my whole life.
Okay, for the listeners out there, Bill, you just sort of popped in with a difference between data analytics. Give us a little sort of background on what's the difference.
So I have many times in my life I have Forrest Gump moments, right place, right time, not because I'm tall or good looking or from Iowa. Sometimes you just get lucky in life. And in the late 1980s, I had one of those moments where I got lucky in life. I worked for a company called Metaphor Computers, and our biggest customer, who ended up being our biggest shareholder, was Procter & Gamble. And so Procter & Gamble back in those days, I lived in Cincinnati and I worked at Procter & Gamble, and Procter & Gamble was moving towards what they called data-driven decisions. And after talking to him, I quickly realized that no, it's not data-driven decisions. It's analytics-driven decisions, right? It's using the data to make better decisions. And so a lot of my difference between having data and monetizing data was influenced heavily by those early days at Procter & Gamble, because we were using data for almost every aspect of what was going on inside of Procter & Gamble, from campaigns to where we put buildings to new product introductions. I mean, it was everywhere. And I'm proud to say that I was in the 1987, 88 timeframe. I actually created one of the very first large data warehouses at Procter & Gamble. Now, large back then was 10 gigabytes, and it was stuck in a closet with a bunch of servers and storage, and we had wires hanging everywhere in this closet, and only 2 people were allowed to go into that closet and do anything with it. And I was one of the 2, right? But that was 10 gigabytes. And we had gotten all this electronic point of sale data from Walmart, and we were like, this is great shit, because we can see what's going on in the markets. We know what pricing impacts. We can do this. And so long-winded answer was that my experience at Procter & Gamble really helped me to understand the difference between having data and monetizing or making decisions on data.
You had 10 gigabytes. Did you also have feet? No, I think back to my early days at the Hubble telescope. I was working on colliding galaxies, and I needed to buy a disk drive to store the output from my computer simulation. So I had to write a proposal for a 1 gigabyte hard drive, which cost in 1990 $38,000 for 1 gigabyte hard drive. I had to write a proposal to buy what you could get 32 or 64 gigs and thumb drives as giveaways at conferences these days.
I throw them away now.
I wish I had a time machine. I could take all my thumb drives and go back to
I've got this.
My iPhone has half a terabyte on space on it, right? Half a terabyte. Well, being a part of the terabyte data warehouse was a big deal.
Well, my funniest joke about these smartphone things is we have more power in this smartphone than that NASA used to send the astronauts to the moon, and so they use that compute power to send people to the moon and back, and we use it to throw birds at pigs.
and the latter is really a lot of fun.
Of course it is. I got addicted to birds and pigs once upon a time.
Hey,
I played every single level on my smartphone when I bought that first smartphone. I went back and played it all again and improved till I got the maximum possible score and all 256 levels. And then I never played it again ever since. That was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Or 6 years. Whatever.
Did they make a movie out of that? I thought they made a movie too. They
did. Yes, they did.
Amazing. Brilliant.
Good luck finding it.
Yeah. All right. So this is what we're going to do.
Not exactly Academy Award material, but okay.
No. So this is what we're going to do, you two. One of the challenges that, fortunately for me, I've interviewed a lot of leaders like you. And some of the conversations we have, and if I had a nickel, like you guys have a nickel, if I had a nickel, if somebody says Industry 4.0, oh, that's great. What is that? Oh, that's the digitization. That's your journey. This is AI. This is ML. This is the edge. This is the cloud. And it's all just data scientists, data analytics, data this. And my journey in this conversation is to try to navigate those waters to make it somewhat simple for a butter knife like me. I'm not the sharpest tool in the drawer, but somebody like me that can say, I get it. I understand. Why am I, concerned here, but I'm not concerned here. Who's going to do, who's driving this bus? That type of thing. And that's why you have said yes to get on this particular podcast to have that conversation. And I thank Bill for that. So if it gets all out of hand and everything, it's Bill's fault. If it works real well, it's my idea. That's how it's going to roll.
Wait, I just felt the bus bumping over me again.
You're going to back up. Beep, beep, beep. All right, I just said that. So with that said, and with that, all that information that's just flying around out there, and especially with this whole COVID two-finger death punch world we live in, I want to know why. And I'll throw this out to you, Kirk. Why is it all of a sudden data is important?
Well, because it's a 4-letter word and we love them. But anyways.
I can spell it. I can spell it.
Well, for me, I want to just reflect something Bill had said a few minutes ago, which is why I think it's so important, and that is the analytics. And it took me a little while to get to where Bill got in the 1880s. I mean, I worked with data for years, and I really love data, making it available to people. And I mean, my job at NASA was doing that. But then it just sort of dawned on me not too many years ago that it's not about the data, it's about the outputs, it's about the analytics, it's about what you can do with that input. So the real difference between data and analytics, the data are the input, and everyone has lots of input. That's not a differentiator of any kind. I mean, every business, every organization has data. You can't just say I have a lot of data and expect that to be of any value to anybody. But what's valuable are your unique outputs. And so what data is good for is improving decisions, improving outputs, creating new data products, creating new experiences, creating new services that the data fuels. So I like to tell people it's like getting a fancy car. You don't brag about the fuel you're putting in it. You brag about the cool car. And you don't just have the cool car just for its own sake, but to get somewhere, right? So it's the journey and the destination that matter, and that you care about. It's not the fuel. But if you don't have the fuel, none of that is possible. So data is absolutely critical to fuel things. Doesn't mean we can't go wrong with what we do. In the same way, you can make a wrong turn in your car and get lost.
Right.
It's not the fuel's fault. It's the human's fault for not using it correctly.
Now, Bill, I'm gonna sort of throw this out. It just seems like I don't know when, but it just seemed like last year we couldn't do this or do whatever it is, but this year we can. And for me, what fundamentally changed so that all of a sudden companies had data, but then all of a sudden we can do the analytics. We can all of a sudden create outputs. What happened?
So I think we changed the frame of the conversation. And what I mean by that is that the smart organizations realized that the data conversation was circular and spinning wheels, that when you change the conversation and framed it around, as Kirk mentioned, the output you're trying to drive, everything became self-evident. When you understood what it is you're trying to accomplish, what it is these outputs you're trying to drive, then you realize that, well, it's the analytics that I need to drive those improvements and outcomes, and then there's data that fuels that. And it changed the conversation from people trying to figure out what's in the data that's of value, which is a fruitless conversation, because if you don't know the use cases, you can't differentiate signal from noise in the data. And so the smart organizations, which by the way, not everybody's smart yet, but if you start with the use cases, the outcomes, you're trying to drive, that frames everything. And that's one of the things that this University of San Francisco research project we did on the economic value of data. We went through, and I think I talked about this, Scott, on the previous call, was that one of the advantages of being a professor is I have access to a lot of really smart, really eager, hard-charging, free resources, and turn them loose on this problem of how do you figure out the value of data. And they kept coming back around to, every time they started down the data path, it ended up being a dead end. They couldn't drive through data and get to where they wanted to go. But when they realized that if you started with the use cases, what problems are you trying to solve, what decisions are we trying to make, then everything else fell out behind it, including the ability to now have a methodology for actually calculating and quantifying the economic value of data.
Yeah, and I see where you're going with that. And I understand exactly what you're saying, and I like that. And given my past experience with data, it's a lot. And I mean, if you start saying, hey, I want to start collecting data, and I've got a business, and I want to start pulling in the data, you quickly realize that you better have your use cases you better figure it out, or you're not going to get anywhere. You're just filling up that car with gas, and that's it. You're not going anywhere. Who do I trust, Kirk? Who do I trust to come up with the right use cases? Because I can only imagine, just FYI, I can only imagine saying, oh yeah, that number's real important. And that number, if I divide it by that number, I get this result, and that's this action. And then all of a sudden, I do that action, and it doesn't work. Now, it's not my fault. It's your fault, Kirk, period. And I'm going to make sure that.
We already knew that. Yeah, it's your fault, Kirk.
My denominator doesn't work right, and you grabbed the wrong data. How do I begin to even trust you in determining the data? Because my business is very special. It's a unique business.
I think the important thing is, again, to focus on the business, right? So I don't know if there's necessarily one person or one department or level of person in a business that figures out those use cases. It's got to be a conversation. Of course, it starts from the leadership, but really where it starts is from sort of the mission statement of the organization. I mean, it's like, what are we here for? What are we trying to accomplish, right? We may have all kinds of interesting data on our customers and say, wow, I can use this data to sell more aspirin to my customers, and say, well, are you in the business of improving people's health, or are you really, what are you in the business for? So don't go chasing use cases because you have data that might satisfy a use case. Figure out what your North Star is. What is your mission? I started recently talking with a guy who's fairly on in years, and he's suffering from cancer right now. So I've had some conversations with him. His family encouraged me to reach out to him, and I just enjoy talking with him. He's a former NASA engineer. He worked on the Apollo mission, and he introduced me to this concept of mission engineering. Right? When I was at NASA, I learned about system engineering, which is something I never learned in graduate school astronomy. Right? You don't learn the system engineering in astronomy grad school. But I learned about system engineering, which is defining user requirements, system requirements, functional requirements before you build something. What is it we're building towards? All right. You start with the end goal in mind, and then you design to those end goals. Right. Then you decide what you need to build, what data you need to collect, what is it going to be towards what end. And so he and I were talking about systems engineering. He said, no, in his years at NASA, especially during the Apollo program, they've focused on something which they never put a name to, but this guy now that I'm talking with, he and I are going to try to write a book on this new concept called mission engineering. And he said what the mission engineering concept is exemplified in the Apollo program, because all those different components of the Apollo mission had systems engineering behind it, right? So the landing vehicle, the launch vehicle, I didn't have rovers, but I mean the ascent vehicle, the command module, they all had systems engineering behind them, right? They had to perform a certain way, et cetera. He said, but the mission was to send those people to the moon, gather whatever scientific result, return them home, and then safely to their family. The mission was not a success until those astronauts were back home in Houston with their families. So it wasn't about the systems, it was about the mission. And so this whole idea of what is your mission, let that now dictate what systems you need, what goals and objectives, and therefore use cases to meet those goals and objectives, and then consequently, what data do I need to use to get there? And so it's a conversation among multiple people. Again, leadership leads, but there are people who have their boots on the ground in any organization in the business. They sort of have a sense of what's happening. Don't exclude those people, include those people. And again, the data analytics people are the ones who know the data. Get those people in the conversation, because then they can tell you, yay or nay, we can do this.
All right, so we just got done talking about the mission. We've got this mission, and I like the way Kirk sort of laid it out. I get it, because I'm a big anything Apollo fan, and I get it. Now, at that point, you're going to have to pull in those data analytics, because you don't know what the data is. Those data individuals know what the data is. Is that when you start pulling them in?
I love Kurt's explanation of mission engineering and focus on the mission. I think that's the starting point. And what we do is we focus in on what is an organization's strategic business initiatives. Like, what is it trying to accomplish? I love this idea that a mission for the Apollo program was getting people safely home to their families. It wasn't launching, it wasn't even returning, it was all the way through. Organizations do have missions. And these missions, by the way, change year after year. Some are looking to acquire new customers, some are looking to open new branches, some are looking to reduce operational costs or reduce unplanned operational downtime. So what we do is we also believe you need to start with that kind of a mission. And then what we focus in on are the decisions that the key stakeholders need to make in support of that mission. we find that if we focus on the decisions, we're able to not only focus the data and analytics aspects. Once we understand the decisions,
right,
then if we know the decisions, the challenge then becomes putting in place a process to identify, validate, value, and prioritize those decisions. Not all decisions are of equal value. Some have to happen before other decisions happen. And so that understanding decisions tells us what data we're going to need, what analytics we're going to need. But it also has a very surprising side benefit. Most data science projects, in my experience, fail not because of technology, but because of organizational problems, particular passive-aggressive behavior.
People.
Passive-aggressive behavior kills lots of projects because you haven't brought all the key stakeholders into the conversation and they haven't had a chance to have their voices be heard. So by focusing on the cross-functional group of stakeholders, those people who either are impacted or who either impact or are impacted by that strategic business initiative or by that mission, by focusing on them, you bring them in, they have a chance for their voices to be heard, you embrace the ambiguity of diversity of perspectives, and you basically build and synergize upon that. And so, and here's a really key point. Organizationally, when you do that, when you embrace the diversity of perspectives, what happens, you transform the conversation to one of compromise. By the way, I'm not a fan of compromise. Compromise means that people are giving up things of value in order to move forward. Strike the word compromise. Instead, focus on the word synergize. What I want to do is I want to leverage these different perspectives. I want to bend them and blend them together and come up with something best. I don't want the least worst option through compromise. I want to synergize to find the best option.
Okay, so I'm gonna take my fantastic radio host hat off. I can't, but I would, and then I'm gonna put a business hat on. And what I'm hearing, what you're saying, I'm the CEO, and I know that there's value, whatever that value might be, in my data. Got this business, data's out there. There's got to be value in there. I just intrinsically know. Now, here's where I struggle. So, Kurt, I contact you. Kurt, I need for you to come on in here. Let's get this mission all, dialed in and all that good stuff. I'm concerned that because I've got data everywhere. I mean, it's a doggone data soup. I'm going to be living this for the rest of my career. Tell me why I'm not going to live this data soup, and I'll use yours, black box life going forward. How do I sort of make it a little bit more consumable for me, Joe Sixpack, owner of this company?
Wow, that's a tall order right there.
Yeah, wow.
I hate to just keep stealing from Bill's ideas, but he's got so many of them. But I definitely love the synergize idea because if you think about an inner join in databases, right, you're just basically removing everything that doesn't conform to one particular sort of a question, right, or query, right? And so an outer join where you bring in other things besides the thing that matches, you bring the things that maybe disagree, there's the divergent data points. And so if you called me up in that conversation, I want to be sure there's other people in the room who, again, not just going to rally around my opinion. I mean, I don't want there to be like an echo chamber and a confirmation bias thing going on there. That sort of sounds like, I don't know what that sounds like, but to me, I hear myself say it. I don't like myself saying that because it sounds like, oh, Kirk, look at him, how cool he is. He's bringing in people with divergent viewpoints. It's not about that. It's about the reality that if we don't get these multiple perspectives and these external things, we won't know what the signal and the noise is. I mean, I think back in my early days of astronomy, we did a lot of, it was just data analysis. It wasn't anything you would call data science. It was just analysis of data, right? And so there's all this kind of separation of signal from the noise. That is, anything that was greater than 3 sigma from the mean, we deleted it. I think back of all those days when I used the standard data analysis software packages that astronomers used, actually had a 3 sigma clipping algorithm. You would just basically remove every data point from the data set that was more than 3 standard deviations from the mean. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how many discoveries did I throw away by clicking on that algorithm?
See, but hold on, I'm going to interrupt you, Kirk. That's the problem I'm having. Is because you, data scientist, Bill, you, data scientist, you love this stuff and you see value in just moving this stuff around. I just want my business to run a little bit better. I just want to have better bottom line value. You can continue to look at data and say, and then there's this, there's this big incremental value, and then all of a sudden it just starts getting smaller and smaller. Am I looking at it that, or am I?
Okay, guilty as charged. I mean, I love data. I love data. I can't help myself. Sorry.
You do.
But I've been in that room that you're talking about. I have been in that spot where I'll get all excited and energized by the things I love, and then the client or the boss or whomever is in the room just is looking at me sort of like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. I'll never forget when I worked for this. When I was at NASA, I worked for a small company that was then bought by a larger company. So I was a contract manager, not a NASA government employee. Anyway, so when I caught this data science bug, it was long before we had this word data science. We called data mining, and I wanted to explain to these people, this is what we need to do with our data. And so I didn't have the words analytics and data science. This was 20 years ago. I didn't have those words in my my terminology in my belt. So I didn't know what to call it. Data mining didn't mean anything to them. Machine learning didn't mean anything to them. So I just basically called it information science. So I was talking about information science, how we collect data to find patterns in data, make better decisions, build predictive models, And at the end of this sort of short presentation to the company VP and his executive staff, one of the staff members raised his hand when I was through, and he said, "Why do we need more printers?"
Yeah.
I just looked at him, and then he said, "Why do we need more system administrators?" And I'm scratching my head. And all of a sudden I realized when I was talking about information science, his brain translated that into information technology.
Yes.
So I was talking about we needed more information science in the business. He heard what he heard me saying is we need more printers and system administrators.
Yeah.
And I was just like mind boggled. I mean, it was like, how did what I say get translated into that? But the good news is after we had this sort of discussion and it sort of seemed like it was a complete dead end, the VP of the organization, of the business, dismissed his executive staff, and I was actually making a pitch for some funding to start up an institute, which was my big idea, was we could have this sort of internal institute around information science within this business. So anyway, the VP dismissed the other people, and before I left the room, he reached out to me and he said, "Kirk, you have your money." He said, "They don't get it, but I get it." So
that's just very interesting.
So you need multiple people in the room so that it's not just me having a conversation with the person who doesn't get it. It's other people in the room who can help the dialogue and set me straight. If I'm getting too hyperactive and hyper excited about my data, rein me in. Back up, Kirk. We got a business to run here. Okay, I get it.
Okay, so we've had this conversation now, Bill, as an owner of the company, and you need a team, and they're all in this room together. I believe that this initiative of trying to really dive into the data, trying to be more efficient, pull out that analytics to be able to make better decisions, you're taking my job away, and I'm not going to cooperate.
So, Scott, I'm gonna deviate slightly. Kirk said something that was very powerful. He was talking about auto clipping things outside 3 standard deviations.
Yeah, I heard it clearly.
Which is how many organizations operate. They operate around averages and standards. And if you run a business targeting averages, at best you're going to get average results. And what happens is there has to be a mental frame shift that outliers aren't bad. Outliers might be new discoveries, might be ways to monetize new things. And I'm sorry, I'm taking this conversation direction, but I was very intrigued, Kirk, by what you said. And then you talk about, information management science. And it made me think about the challenge organizations have. And I see this in spades when I talk to a chief data officer. I got to tell you right now, I hate that term. I hate the term chief data officer because if there's somebody out there whose job is to kind of sweep up all the data. It reminds me of those Rocky and Bullwinkle movies. The guy walking behind the elephant, sweeping up all the elephant poop, right? That's your job. You're sweeping up all the data poop, right? No, the chief data officer is the wrong title. It needs to be a chief data monetization officer. And what we need to have is we need a data monetization.
That's a big doggone long name.
Yeah,
gonna roll off the car.
Analytics officer all the way.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. It's this science of data monetization. You want to figure out, how do we get people to adopt this? How do we get people to embrace analytics? And it's got to be around data monetization, because I think the best data scientist, leader of the most powerful data scientist image out there is Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob. And what does Mr. Krabs care about? Money, 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 right? That's what people want. They got this data and they want to get money out of it. I always get frustrated when people talk about the 3 V's of big data: volume, velocity, and variety, right? Blah, blah, blah. I've not met a CEO anywhere who gives a shit about the 3 V's of big data.
That's true.
What they care about are the 4 M's of big data. Make me more money, 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 as Mr. Krabs would say.
It's true.
And so I think what happens here, Scott, is you take and you shift the frame. And you're thinking about the mission that Kirk talked about earlier. And we talked about understanding how we optimize decisions, how we empower people across the organization through data and analytics to make better decisions, so that they can all make more money and they can all get, raises, and they all can make their numbers and what's in it for me, blah, blah, blah. But it has to shift. It can't be about data and it can't be about analytics if it's not about money first.
But here's the funny thing there, Bill. You're absolutely spot on. You're absolutely spot on. Me, business hat on right now. Yes, I want revenue. I want money to come on in. I want to be able to figure that out day in, day out. And that is the right messaging. It's a messaging challenge. That's one. But 2, I go out on Google and I can type in data whatever, and there is noise out there. And all I want to do, me, business owner, is make money. How the hell do I sift through that kind of crap? That pisses me off. What do I do? What do I do? I don't know where to go. Because that message of money, 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 it's not resonating. And then that message needs to resonate, because then all of a sudden me, employee, is not fearful of losing my job because you're coming in and saying data, data, data. It's a different thing.
Let me build on something Kirk said earlier too. He said every company's problems are different. If you think you're going to go to Google and get your answer, you've already lost the battle, right? The game over. Close for out of business sign, put it on the door right now. The challenge is organizations need to understand what their mission is, what it is they're trying to accomplish, what are their key business initiatives. They know that. If you go down into the decisions, the thing that I've learned in my 40-some years in this industry is every business person I've talked to knows exactly what decisions they're trying to make. They've been trying to make them for years, decades, generations. Right? The decisions haven't changed. What's happened is by virtue of the data and analytics is we've changed the answers. We're no longer clipping data at the 3rd standard deviation, because it's those things out there that I don't ignore outliers. Now I monetize outliers. Right. And so there's this
hold on. You've got to figure out how to monetize those outliers. I
know how. I focus on the decisions. I know the decisions will tell me which customers are most important. Well, they may be stuck on the outliers, right? They may be the group of customers that are 3 standard deviations outside the norm. Oh, so I'm going to ignore them. Well, maybe not. Maybe those are your most important customers. So I think when you focus on the decision you're trying to make, who are my most important customers, which, by the way, is an incredibly hard question. Incredibly hard question. Can't be answered with a single query. Probably can't be answered with a single meeting, right? There's so many variables that go in there. But if you look at the averages, right? Businesses get lazy. We don't look at the granularity of the data. We get hung up on these averages. And when you focus on averages, as I said before, at best, you're going to get average results.
Yeah, let me jump in there.
Yeah.
I love outliers. First of all.
Yeah. That's a bumper sticker now. I love outliers.
I hope so. The majority of my doctoral students did their dissertation on surprise discovery, which is my phrase for outlier detection, novelty discovery, anomaly detection. And I always said, oh, those are such negative terms, outlier detection, anomaly detection. Really what you're talking about is the surprising, unexpected thing in your data. And so if you look up a statistics books, you're not going to see the phrase just surprise discovery. You'll see outlier detection.
Yeah.
And have all these algorithms about finding data points that are far from the mean. What about the data point is right in the middle of the distribution where there's not supposed to be any data points at the point of this in the middle of the distribution? That is a surprising discovery. Anyway, so for me, it's like the old joke or the old phrase, one man's garbage is another man's treasure, right? So one person's outlier is signal is another person's noise, right? The noise might be where that monetization happened. And I love what Bill is saying about, you don't want to be average, you want to be special, right? You want to have a unique business. And I also want to tap into something else he said about you don't go to Google to figure out how to do something because then you're going to get at.
No, go ahead.
So if 15 or whatever years ago when Jeff Bezos started selling books out of his garage, if he did a web search on how do you run a book business, we would never have Amazon today, right?
True.
And I want to tie that back to Google, if I may. When I mentioned mission engineering and business mission before, whenever I talk about this with students, I always have them try to guess what Google's mission statement is. And frequently they talk about Google being a search engine and it's all about search and whatever, or maybe, making, money off of ads and stuff. But I said, but what is their mission? And usually gets a blank stare. So I'm going to literally read it to you. I'm not doing this by memory. I'm actually looking at google.com. Our mission statement is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Period. That has been their mission statement since the beginning. They are a $1 trillion business. Personally, I never spent a dime on anything that I ever used from Google, Gmail, Google Maps, Google Cloud.
It's true.
I mean, I have never paid them anything yet. They're a $1 trillion business. They don't sell anything except your data, basically.
Yeah,
so they figured out that what they do, if they take this data and they can organize it and make it accessible and useful, they can change the world. And they can become a $1 trillion business. Well, of course, not everybody's going to be a $1 trillion business, obviously, like Amazon and Google. But it's how you use your data. And that's what Jeff Bezos did with Amazon, right? Excuse me. I read once that he spends several hours each morning just looking at the data. And the most...
So he gets it. Okay. So, again, I have my hat on there, Kirk, and I come to you because apparently I can't go to, I got to do something. I got to find a solution with this data. So Google's out. I got to figure it out. So I find you. I go to LinkedIn, find you. Boom. There we go. Now, I'm the head cheese at this particular organization. I say, I like what you're saying. Let's start down and let's create the mission. Let's do this stuff. And how is that sustainable going forward? How? I mean, you're telling me that there's gems, surprise detections within the data. And it sounds to me like it's just an ongoing relationship or engagement with you, the data scientist, or your team. And it just never stops. Is there a point where I can say, I made it, and it's sustainable, and it's going to, keep reaping benefits along into the future after I leave? Is there a point? Or is it just forever?
Well, I think you just gave me an idea for a new business that Bill and I are going to start. We're going to call it analytics therapy, because what it is you need to have the conversation. Why did you get into this in the first place? What is it you really care about? What is your passion?
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people, when they start businesses, I want to make money, but is that why you become a doctor? Why you become a fire person? Why you become a school teacher? Well, not a school teacher. You're not going to make too much money, but I mean, you do it because you have a passion for it.
Right.
I mean, I spent 20 years at NASA, and I caught the data science bug, and I decided I wanted to teach the world about data science. So I took a 50% pay cut to go to a university to teach data science. People thought I was crazy. My wife gave me the green light. She said, go for it, because this is what you feel passionate about. So have that conversation, and it's ongoing. Okay, so I want to sort of disagree a little bit with a word I heard Bill say earlier. He said, mission, is to make more revenue. Mission is to sell more widgets to improve customer satisfaction and revenue. No, those are objectives. Those are objectives. That's not your mission statement. Just like Google, right? Google sells ads and they make a lot of money, but their mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So have that conversation. That's the analytics therapy. Talk about why are you in this? And once we do that, then we can start moving that conversation to what are the analytics? Are you trying to optimize something, predict something, detect something, diagnose something? Have that conversation. Before we talk about neural networks and all kinds of other baloney, talk about what is your objective. You want to optimize something? You want to detect something? Let's say you're trying to, bring a cure to COVID or something. You want to be able to detect early warning signs of the next pandemic or something. I mean, you have to think about what is it that I care about, what are you doing, and have that real conversation. And ultimately, it comes back to the analytics and then the data that needs to drive those analytics.
But then again, there's no end to it, Kirk. It's like data's data. I mean, you guys are just into it, baby. And
that's why I call it therapy, right? You need to have the conversation frequently to bring you back to reality.
Yes.
This is really what you care about.
I love the fact that you talk about messaging. Again, to Bill, to your point, there is a real clear message that has to get out there that makes sense, right? That makes sense. And that the data pill is easier to swallow. It's not a threat, from what I hear, it's not a threat to my business, meaning my job, my livelihood. It could be if I choose the wrong data set and said, hey, Bill, I like that. Let's run with it and make decisions off of it. Right. And then it, goes south and it doesn't work worth a lick. But for the reality is that data has a return on that investment. If I can find the data, it can reap returns. And then recognize that my business is changing. It changes all the time. My equipment out there might change. So the conversation of data and collecting the right data has to always evolve and grow and expand, because things change. It's not a static environment. So that's just me going off on a tangent.
Yes.
All right.
And so the world of data, big data, analytics, data science, machine learning, AI has changed dramatically in 25 years since the birth of Google, but Google has not deviated from its mission statement in 25 years or 20.
Yeah, see, that's key.
That's what I mean, is that it's just the thing that's the anchor, right? If your anchor is to make a lot of money, well, I mean, there's going to be years that's not going to happen. So you throw in the towel. No, if you really are passionate about what you do and what you believe, then you don't give it up when the first storm comes.
See, and that's a real important component. That's just fundamental with anything, right? You got to stick it out. If you truly believe, if I'm a business owner and I truly believe that there's gold in that data, and I've got to go mine that data, and I've got to get the right people in place to be able to do that. I've got to define my mission to be able to say, okay, I got it. This is where I'm going, right over here. You got to stick that out, because like you said, Kirk, it might take some time before you truly receive and reap the benefits. Let me ask you this question. Go ahead, Bill.
So your question was, how do I get started?
Yeah,
right? Yeah. And
I'll go to Kirk and you.
When I have conversation with executives, I'm a very simple boy from Iowa, and I always say, well, how do you make money? How does your organization make money? If you want to figure out where to start, tell me, how do you make money? Now, profits and nonprofits alike need to make money. You could be a nonprofit, but if you don't make money, you're not going to exist. So, how do you make money? And then I like what Kirk said, and the way that you help organizations sort of start transitioning this idea of how to leverage data is I know what decision you're trying to make, but what would you like to predict? I find that when I talk to organizations and look at their reports, if you can take those reports, the questions they're asking today, and turn them into predictions, now you have something that they can hang on to. Because the problem isn't the data and analytics. The problem is getting their mindset around, why should I do this? Yeah. So for example, instead of, how many new customers did I have last month? Wouldn't you like to know how many new customers you're going to likely get next month? If you, instead of asking, what were my supply chain or inventory costs last month, wouldn't it be great if you could predict what they might be next month? And that's not a hard transition. It's an actually very simple transition in order to get sort of their head around what they want to do. So if you want to figure out how to get started, again, profit or nonprofit, companies need to make money to survive, to chase the mission, to chase that passion, right? And they've got initiatives they go after. But we can make sure this conversation is very straightforward by not overwhelming them with technology, but instead let's focus in that conversation they want to have about how do we help them, make more money.
See, I like that. And because I'm a simple guy, I need simple solutions, and that messaging is always very important. To you, Bill, when you have that conversation with executives, when you have that conversation with, big thinkers, what is the biggest pushback that you sort of see a trend happening? Being a data guy, you see those trends. What's happening? What's the biggest pushback?
This will get me in trouble, but I'll say it anyway. I think CIOs are my biggest challenge. They've gotten to where they have gotten because they've made decisions that have not been bad. I run into a lot of CEOs who have risen to fame because of their ERP decisions, right? And now they have that ERP mindset, and they're used to projects that take 5 years and cost $30 million and thousands of people die in the process. But it's the CIOs are challenged to be able to have a conversation about the business because they've never had those conversations before. And a lot of the CXOs is looking at the CIO saying, well, help me figure out how to do this. CIOs have never been trained to do that. Yeah, you're going to run into some who really are forward thinkers, who really know they need to make this shift. But overall, what dooms most organizations is their inability to unlearn what got them to where they are in order to learn how they go forward. If you're climbing a ladder at some point in time, you've got to let go of that rung below you to reach up. And getting executives to unlearn so they can learn something new is a huge challenge in my perspective.
See, this is interesting because what I hear there's a theme that's happening here, and it's fine. Data's important. There's gold in them hills. It needs to be properly evaluated and create the mission and all that good stuff. And it's all there. And I think it's undisputable. Got it. It gets down to people. It gets down to that messaging. It gets down to people just saying, I got it. And as a while, it just keeps on ticking and ticking and ticking, meaning time goes by and people are missing opportunities. Do you see that, Kirk?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the biggest impediments I see is more cultural about getting this stuff forward. I certainly agree with what Bill's saying about sort of the organizational roadblocks, but cultural to me means, as a scientist, that the culture of experimentation is just not acceptable to some organizations. They don't accept the idea that you got to have some failures in order to learn what to do right. And everything we have in our world is based upon experimentation, even though our forms of government and the agencies within governments, we don't think about it that way. But there's historical precedents of things that have worked and not worked. Okay, so maybe your organization hasn't gone through that experimentation phase. Well, then maybe you should, because until you try new things, you're never going to know what's going to work. And so culture of experimentation is basically basically fail fast to learn fast. It's a learning organization. When I say learning organization, a lot of times people just immediately think, oh, we have a training program. No, I'm not talking about training programs. I'm not talking about skill. I'm talking about the organization itself is a learning organization. And just like children learn not to do things like they don't touch the stove again after they burn their finger the first time, we learn from experience. There's something else in the world that learns from experience. It's called machine learning. The first definition I ever saw of machine learning 23 years ago in Tom Mitchell's fabulous book on machine learning, he said machine learning is the set of mathematical algorithms that learn from experience. And that was it. I said, what? Say that again? Algorithms that learn from experience. I said, no, there's got to be something more than this. I mean, I've had 13 years of calculus and linear algebra and abstract geometries. It's got to be more than that one sentence, right? But then it occurred to me that it's about learning the patterns in the data, and you learn from experience. And what does learn from experience mean? You learn from your mistakes. So I always tell people, think like a teenager, right? Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. Let me say it again. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. Okay, that applies to raising teenagers, and it applies to machine learning, and it applies to business organizations. And so I've actually literally talked about the fail fast to learn fast mentality, clients, and I get this strong pushback. Oh no, we don't fail here. We're not going to fail. And I say, you're talking about strategic failure. I'm not saying you're strategically planning to fail. You're strategically planning to win. In order to win the war, sometimes you got to lose the battle. And to win the battle, sometimes you got to lose the hill. I mean, you got to choose your battles and realize that it's the small failures that lead to the big understandings and experience insights that lead to the big victories later.
Oh, I got to jump here. This is Kurt has nailed it, right? It's about learning. In the digital economy, in digital industries, economies of learning are more powerful than economies of scale. The ability to learn faster than your competition is going to differentiate those companies that survive from those that perish. It's about learning, and you're spot on that machine learning and deep learning, these are all technologies to help us learn, but you can't learn if you're not willing to try things. This is why I'm a huge fan of design thinking. Design thinking is designed to push you out of your comfort zone, to embrace things that may not be right in order to figure out what is. If you don't have experimentation, you're not going to learn. And if you're not going to learn, you're not going to survive. And it's interesting, this whole economies of learning is manifesting itself in the technology. Kirk talked about machine learning and deep learning and such. These are all learning technologies, but equally important, if not more so, is in the humans. How are we empowering humans to be able to try things, be comfortable with failure, and learn from that? If you're not failing, you're not trying.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, this whole COVID pandemic, I think pre-pandemic, we were comfortable doing whatever and everything, you know, living life, right? You get hit by the pandemic, and then all of a sudden you're forced to think differently. You're forced to figure out solutions. You're forced to actually have to learn new things and do certain things. And so from my perspective, and what I hear you talk about, Bill, is this sort of positive element that's associated with it, getting people to learn and being comfortable with failing. That's a big deal. Being comfortable to fail, but I do it all the time, you know.
Well, my company, Booz Allen, did a survey of our data scientists. This was before I joined 5 years ago. And at that point, we had only 600 data scientists. Now we have over 2,000.
Jeez.
But they basically did what's called a Hogan personality test, which a lot of employers do to figure out what people's strengths are and strengths and weaknesses, and to help them place them in the right jobs within the company. I mean, it's not a scary thing. It's a common sort of thing to make sure you build the right teams, et cetera. And out of that study of our data scientists, let's figure out sort of what makes a good data scientist. One statistic, one particular characterization of successful data science, it really stuck out. And that one was something that the Hogan test calls tolerance for ambiguity.
You're just feeding Bill's.
No, you cannot be a good scientist if you think everything has a yes or no answer and nothing else. In data science, most things are probabilistic answers. There's some likelihood this is the answer, but there is no, and that's really hard, I would imagine, for a CEO to accept the fact that you're only telling me that this has a 60% chance of success. I want something that has a 100% chance of success. Well, I guess if you ignore the data, you have a 100% success, a chance of failure. You do have a 100% chance of failure if you don't follow, the evidence. If you don't follow the evidence that's pointing you to a certain decision.
See, this is just fascinating. I mean, this conversation, outside of the data, outside of the analytics, outside of whatever we talked about, it goes to the heart, the core of companies, people, leaders, and changing that culture to be able to be a learning organization and feel comfortable with the research that could possibly fail. And that CEO is saying, yeah, I'm okay with failure. And be able to say it with a smile on your face. That's huge. And what you're talking about is huge. But the future, whatever that looks like, the next normal, the future demands that you be innovative in that sense. You agree with that, Bill?
So, Scott, the idea of failure and learning through failure is important. And I love the fact that a tolerance for ambiguity is #1 data science characteristic. All of our data science projects have a design thinking person on the project. We group them together because design thinking gives you tools for how you manage and exploit ambiguity. I can't walk into a CEO and saying, you got to embrace an organizational mentality of failure, accepting failure. But what I can do is I can talk to them at the level of the decisions and how to embrace ambiguity or diversity of perspectives to help come up with better decisions, right? Kirk hit it right on the head, right? And Yogi Berra said it very well. Making predictions are really hard, especially predictions about the future, right? They're not 100%. So how do I go from that 80% to 84 to 86 to 87.5%? I do it by bringing in a whole bunch of other different perspectives and trying lots of different combinations. I mean, data science what is data science? Data science is all about finding those variables and metrics that might be better predictors of performance. Period. That's all it is, right? And so I want to bring in a wide, diverse set of perspectives to see if we can find those variables and metrics that might be better predictors. So I can go from, again, 80 to 82 to 86, et cetera, ... It's the ambiguity isn't to be avoided, is to be embraced. And by the way, I'm going to go off on a real big tangent here. The problem with our society today is we don't have a tolerance for ambiguity.
We don't.
We see the conversations happening across the news channels and social media and all the political side. It's about the ambiguity's bad, right? We got to all be the same. Bullshit, right? Ambiguity is how the human race has evolved and survived. If we were all clones of each other, we'd been wiped out centuries ago. So this idea that ambiguity and this diversity of perspectives is bad is exactly that data science will fail if we don't embrace ambiguity. And design thinking provides you these kinds of tools that says, don't avoid ambiguity, friggin' embrace it. Grab it by the throat.
I'll tell you, man.
Bring it to your solutions.
I can see. I'm sitting in my corner office. I'm having a grand old time. I'm the CEO, and I'm a big thinker. And I'm just sitting there, and here comes a knock on the door. It's Kirk. And I'm telling you, Kirk was wonderful last week, but Kirk came back in, and now he's starting to chew my ear on this little incremental improvement. And I guarantee you, I'm going to get to Kirk, and I'm going to say, just deal with it. Just I want just make it happen. That's how I see it. And that's, you guys live in that world. I live in the world of just like, is it going to bring money in? Is it a right, wrong? And a lot of people live in that world too as well. This is a whole messaging issue. It's a whole mission. Kirk, I got a question to ask you. This is all fascinating. This is all pretty cool stuff. I don't have a clue. It's, I see Picasso out there. I don't know when Picasso decided to pull away from that painting and he said it was done. Where do you see it going? Where do you see, put that future cap on, and where do you see this? What can businesses expect?
Oh my gosh.
I just don't know. It's like, woo-hoo, it's a wild west out there of data. I'm having a grand old time. Woo.
Well, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So let's see what we can do here.
Yeah.
No, but I think, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to answer your question, but I've had some thoughts towards that end. One of which I was thinking a little while ago, you know, that over 100 years ago, 120 so years ago, one of the major executives in the corporate executive suite of corporations was the CEO, the Chief Electricity Officer. Because electricity was this new thing. They had to manage the fear and manage the implementation of this new thing. And this, we never done it this way before. I don't know about this stuff. I might lose my job because my job is to turn on the gas lamps every night in the business and turn them off when people leave. I mean, so they had this person whose job was to manage that transition, manage the digital, well, in that case, electrical transformation. If we had Twitter in those days, electrical transformation would be a trending hashtag.
Yeah, you know it would be.
So 100 years from now, people may have the same humor and laughter that we're having right now, looking at us saying, "Oh, those people talked about having chief data officers." I mean, everything is digital and data. What were they thinking? I mean, why do they need to have a chief data officer?
True.
And so I think this stuff will eventually become just part of the fabric of just doing business. I mean, we talk about digital transformation. I mean, if you haven't done that already, you might as well just fold up your tent. I mean, the world is digital, right? The world is digital, and so it's not really a unique conversation. Just like I said earlier, brag that you have a lot of data as an organization as a non-starter. Everyone's got lots of data. I mean, what's the point? What's the point of talking about that? I mean, I would work with my students, and we had a spreadsheet of galaxy data. They could probably copy all the numbers from the spreadsheet in a couple hours on a piece of paper. Is that big data? Absolutely not. But it had 26 columns of data for these few thousand galaxies. And if we were to explore every combination of those 26 features, taking one at a time, two at a time, three at a time, four at a time, and doing all our different types of analyses, outlier detection, principal component analysis, clustering analysis, all this stuff, it would take them 100 billion lifetimes of the universe to analyze all possible combinations. That's big data. I can write it down on a piece of paper in a couple hours, but that's discovery potential is enormous from a small data set. So let's get over it that it's not. So what we need to be talking about is what differentiate you is the things you're doing with all that digital data stuff, which is part of the fabric of everything, right? Anyway, so I think where we're going here is that we're going to sort of get over some of the fear factor and the chief data officer factor that we need that person to manage the fear and transition to being a data organization. No, that is what you ought to be anyway. And I understand you need to have such a person under certain circumstances. I'm not negating that. I understand that is a necessary position in a lot of organizations. But anyway, I think the movement is towards focusing, again, like a broken record today, focusing on outcomes, focusing on the analytics, which are the outputs and the outcomes of all these things we're doing.
But I agree with you, Kirk. I mean, I like the fact that you keep on going, focus on the outcomes. That helps sort of take this, hairy monster that I look at, not from you guys, because you guys live in the world of hairy monsters. I look at it and it's just like, okay, I get it. You guys are just throwing your hair around. I don't have any hair. Anyway, I like it. And don't even do that.
My wife points out my bald spot. Anyway.
Yeah, right. Well, what do you think about that? You had a comment about that.
I'm sorry, me? Yeah. What I was going to say is, I think I love, Kirk, your example of the chief electricity officer and how electricity just worked its way into the DNA of organizations. You don't think about it. You turn the switch on, you turn the switch off. We're going to see that with data and analytics. One of the things that I most enjoy about teaching is I get a chance to heavily, unduly influence tomorrow's leaders. The teaching I'm doing to not think that data analytics is anything special, it's the new normal. And we're going to find, I think here, Scott, is that in the future, 10, 20, so many years from now, is that no one's going to talk about, being a chief data officer or chief analytics officer. It's just the way that you run a business. It'll be integrated into the DNA of organizations. We'll have everybody will have AI assistants helping them to make better decisions, help them churn through the data. The AI assistant will be like a Yoda sitting on your shoulder, offering you advice, and you'll be having a conversation. You'll be learning together, and they won't think anything of it. It'll be the way that things are. It's unusual for us because we are, as any change takes place, the people hunker down. We don't want to unlearn because we got to where we are because we knew something. And now what we know we're being told isn't valuable anymore. Doesn't mean we're not valuable. It means that we better start learning this new valuable stuff. We're humans, right? I'm not a robot that's programmed to run a certain way. I can actually learn and change things. So I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be people in the business today who are going to start making that transition into that data and analytics is just part of the DNA. If you don't have an aptitude for it, damn it, you better have it because it's going to be like breathing air, right? Kirk, go ahead.
Yes, I'll comment on that. I love this idea you're talking about in the teaching and training the next young minds, because I'm passionate about that and doing that myself. And one of the characteristics of the current fourth industrial revolution, okay, there I threw it out there.
You did, you dropped it.
Is that the previous industrial revolutions, the first, it didn't transition into the second until over 120 or so years later, from the steam engine to electrical power, over 100 years. And then from electrical power to the computer age was like a 60 or 70 year transition. And from the dawn of the computer age to now to this age of hyperconnectivity, where data flows basically facilitate and negotiate everything. It's taken basically like 30 or 40 years from the birth of the computer age, the third industrial revolution, to now have the fourth. And so what we're seeing is that the time period of these revolutions is rapidly decreasing. And so what that says to me is that the lifespan of a person's career is going to extend over more than one revolution, industrial revolution, the way business is done, et cetera. And so anyone who's getting education and training 40 years ago, they could probably expect that once they were through with school, whatever level of schooling it was, they could carry that through for an entire career, 45 years later, retire, and so forth. Now, somewhere in that career journey, you're going to have to relearn and unlearn a lot of stuff. And so if we're not learning oriented as individuals and organizations, we're doomed to go extinct in over the next revolution, because the one that's happening now, there's going to be something else. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe it's going to be more related to this work from home mentality, that we're going to see an entire revolution the way the world, maybe we don't need to travel. We're going to send our avatars and we're going to have augmented reality or even virtual reality, everything. All right. I mean, I probably don't even need to go to a store. It's like that song 2525. I hate to think that song is really talking about the year 2025, where some machine is doing that for you. You don't need your arms and legs anymore.
Go ahead.
But maybe we're going to see more of that sort of virtual business. And I mean, that's a trivialization of industrial revolution. I don't know what it is. I'm not a futurist. I don't know exactly what that next thing's going to be. But if we don't realize that the span of a career now, especially young people coming out today, there's going to be another industrial revolution probably in their career lifespan. And so they better be in a learning and unlearning mode in order to succeed.
That is a great point. And I agree with you 100%. And I'm going to digress real quick. My son just bought a VR headset for PlayStation. Have you ever put one of those on?
I have.
Yeah, they are.
It's stupid. It's amazing. So anyway, to your point, VR, I could see it.
I literally participated in some VR-based training that our company is giving to Air Force personnel who are loading these big jumbo aircraft that transport heavy equipment.
Yeah.
And so I was actually part of the learning experience. I was just in a little room with the head goggles on, but I felt like I was inside of an airplane.
Right there, and you're looking.
But the scary thing was that they opened the door and I walked to the edge, looked out, could see the engine, see the wings, see the chase jets, and my body felt like I feel like when I climb something. I have fear of heights. I literally felt sick, like I was going to fall out of the plane. Wait a minute, I'm just standing in a room with goggles on. But my brain didn't process it that way. My brain processed the sensory input, and so I mean, whole new fields of psychology and sociology, branches of these known disciplines are going to evolve as we start having these kind of virtual business, virtual life. I don't know.
Absolutely agree.
Maybe I'm losing my mind here, so I'll just shut up right now.
No,
Hey, Kirk, have you been on the Star Wars ride at Disney World yet?
I haven't, no.
You would like that. That's a lot of fun.
I get sick on rides, so these aren't the rides I'm looking for.
Well, the thing about these virtual rides, if you ever get sick, you just close your eyes. And then the ride is no longer exists.
I don't know if that helps, because when I read and someone else is driving in the car, I don't normally get car sick, but if I'm reading and not paying attention to where the horizon is in my body.
Good point.
And that's what it is, that you need to have that level set. And that's a good life lesson there too. You need to have that horizon in your frame of view, which is why mission orientation is important.
You're amazing, Kirk. Yeah, just
brought it back. I brought it back.
Brought it all back.
Brilliant. It's like we're down this road and all of a sudden, oh yeah, right, mission. So this brings up a segue into another quick topic that I want to just at least address. Okay. This is going to be for you, Bill. What you're talking about, just once again, me being a person that is not steeped in what you guys are doing, there's a fear on my side. There's a fear of social and, personal, inside my head type stuff where you're pulling data of my behavior, my activity, who I am, right? And you're able to, in essence, exploit it. And right now, I don't see a governing body out there that says, whoa, you're a nefarious type of guy and you're doing nefarious type of things. And I see that you're smart and you're taking data and you're doing nefarious things. That to me that's a scary proposition. And it's getting more and more so that way. Tell me why I shouldn't be scared.
You should be scared. You should be very scared. And if you expect legislation is going to save you here, you're doomed. The only way that you're going to be able to manage and live in a world where people are eyeballing and capturing all of your tendencies and behaviors and exploiting your biases is that if you embrace the art of critical thinking, you have to think for yourself. We're learning in a very harsh way how easily manipulated we are through social media. And how organizations can very quickly pick up our biases. Everybody has biases. If we didn't have biases, we'd all be the same, right? We all have biases that have come because of experience or upbringing, whatever it might be. So, and these organizations are leveraging these biases to heavily influence you. So it's on you as an individual to be accountable for your own thinking. You can't blame your thinking on somebody else. You can't point to the Russians or the Chinese or any other of the whack left or whack right organizations for how you think and how you act. It's on you. And I think that's what frustrates me a lot about the conversation we're having today. And in particular, in the education, when I teach, I have a whole section on critical thinking. How it's important.
That's interesting.
That you have mastered. I spend a lot of time with my kids talking about the importance of critical thinking. My daughter will send me something that's, it's like, really? You think this is true? Research it. Do some drill down. You think that, the Pope didn't vote in the election 3 years ago. I can guarantee that, right? So we can't blame others. We have a blame society. We're very quick to blame other people. Instead, you've got to be accountable. So, to me, if you're expecting the government to bail you out, baby, it ain't happening. You have to be prepared yourself to have that, to protect yourself from the onslaught of how people are going to exploit the data you have to use it against you.
Oh, gosh, now I'm worn out, Bill.
Sorry.
Oh, God.
Sorry. I wanted to hear.
Kirk, bring me off this ledge, please, now.
Okay. I want to preach another chapter from Bill's gospel here, and that's design thinking. So I'm all on board with the critical thinking message he just gave us. Bill, thank you. But also the things you said about design thinking over the years. I mean, I've read a lot of your things the articles you post, and I was first introduced to design thinking before that, but then I saw how you sort of blanket a lot of your messages around design thinking. I really decided to just embrace that as much as I possibly can. And what that means for organizations is that, yeah, if I have access to your data, Scott, right? If I have access to your data in my business, I need to have other perspectives in the room. Okay, other, ethics officers and whoever officers and ombudsmen for customers or whomever whatever you want to call those people, saying, looking at what's going on and said, should you be using Scott's data this way? I mean, should you? I mean, there's famous examples of companies who were found out using data inappropriately, and it was a branding nightmare. It's better to discover before the nightmare that you're doing something wrong. And I think the best way you do that is you have more eyes looking at it. And so more eyes looking at it is a part of design thinking. I mean, it's getting the multiple perspectives, thinking about the design of this thing. What is the purpose it's serving? I always like to harken back. This may seem off topic, but not to me. On human subjects research, and they say, "Oh, wow, that's off topic." So, human subjects research has sort of 3 principles, and that is to do no harm, and basically to be, basically have an informed consent. All right, so be, sort of informed awareness of what's going on, do no harm to anyone, and then shared benefit and shared risk. Okay, so no single subsegment of your population benefits while some other segment endures the risk. It's got to be equitably shared benefit and risk. So you can do things that are risky as long as it's distributed equanimously, whether that's the right word, equally, let's just say equally.
We got it.
But anyway, not to get into the whole long topic of those principles of human subject research, but I like to say AI is like an experiment. It's a grand experiment on humanity. And therefore, it is human subjects research. So we need to take these basic principles that have been applied to medical research for decades and apply them back to ourselves when we design things, to think about those benefits, those risks. Do we need to inform people? Are we doing no harm? I mean, all of those kind of questions need to be addressed.
And they do. And now, just 1 second there. Here's the interesting part. We talked about this Industry 4.0, whatever, the 4th industrial revolution. What always fascinates me, Kirk and Bill, is the speed, right? It's fast. It's like I went to a conference. I broadcast from a conference. We're talking about AI, right? AI, it's all great. It's all wonderful. Still need to be whatever. I come back the next year, and it seems like there's been just drastic improvements or drastic progress in AI. And it's the speed, me, human being, I'm having a hard time consuming it. And so when we start talking about these bodies, it has to happen now. We've got to start. How do we get the community recognizing that this exists? Bill.
The question of ethics is a challenging one. And AI is going to really force us to have to deal with it. The Terminator didn't do anything outside of what their AI utility model told them to do. Right? The Terminator's bad behavior isn't because of the Terminators. Their AI utility model was poorly programmed.
Right. It's optimizing its optimization function.
It was optimizing its utility function, and it was just wailing away at people, right? And so when I think about this, the what is going to happen, and Kirk talked about a chief ethics officer. I think that'd be a very good career choice for a lot of people, because we're going to wrestle with ethics, but ethics is hard. Let me give you an example. Do no harm versus do good. There's big difference between the two. And if you don't know the difference, I'm gonna refer you back to the parable of the Good Samaritan. And so what we've got to do is, as AI becomes more and more prevalent in our organizations, we need to think carefully around the ethics of the AI utility model. Now, a lot of the utility models are optimized around financial and operational executive and around customer experience. But there's other variables too, right? There's ecology, there is environmental, there is spiritual that need to be factored into this thing. And I'll tell you right now, there is no right answer. When you start bringing these different perspectives together, you're going to have ambiguity. Getting back to what Kirk had talked about earlier regarding this embracing the culture of ambiguity. AI is going to force that on us. I believe that AI ultimately is going to make humans more human, because we're going to have to focus in on what it is that makes us human.
Interesting.
Because AI is going to take care of all the mundane bull crap, right? They're going to take care of that. And so this ethics conversation becomes almost everything for us, because if we get it wrong, the Terminators will be walking up and down the streets having a great old time. Right. So it's again, we have to think very carefully about this ethics conversation, and it's not a data scientist conversation. Data scientists aren't the ones who are setting defining the AI utility function. That takes, as Kirk talked about, this design thinking concept of bringing in lots of diverse perspectives, bringing in lots of different ambiguity into the conversation in order to sort of figure out and wrestle with this.
And that brings up a good point. This is not just a regional or a company. This is a global conversation. It's huge.
It's a society, and it's a civilization conversation.
It's civilization. And the reality is it's going to have to happen. It's already there, because you got smart people like you two that are sort of in that world, and you look at it that way. It's just a fast. It's not a big deal. They look good. Kirk, what do you think? Talk to me about that ethics stuff. I like it. It has to happen. You're a smart guy.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'm proud of my humility.
I like my humility too.
Okay, so that was intentionally humorous, but more intentionally, what I mean is that I don't want to assume, because I know something about AI and I know something about data analytics, that I'm going to be any kind of an expert on ethics, because that's a human, broad civilization conversation. And I think we as scientists in this discipline and practitioners, whether or not we're scientists or not, data engineers, data scientists, data decision makers, whatever, we're not the end all and be all of the world, right? So we have a part to play in that, and we need to talk, because we're sort of driving that technology, speedboat right now, and maybe we need to dial it back a bit, and we need to have other people help us to, where and when we need to dial it back.
See, and it's interesting when you start talking about dialing it back. I had this conversation with another gentleman. I think it was AI, right, or something to that effect, and I said, I'm still looking at your version 1, and you're already on version 10, and it's only been a year, and I don't even know what has changed. I haven't even went to 2. So
it's called the pandemic, right? 1,000 years have elapsed in the last 6 months.
Yeah, and gallons of alcohol, big time,
and blue Powerade.
Blue Powerade.
Yeah, my wife hates it, but it matches my shirt.
Color coordinated always. I love it.
Yeah. So anyway, I just those are some of the questions. Okay, I have to wrap this up. This has been going on. We're going to have to cut this in a couple of slices, and I appreciate your willingness for the listeners of Industrial Talk to talk about this very important and dynamic, subject. The last question I have, and this is to you, Kirk, and to you, Bill, but to you, Kirk, and Bill, you get a chance to think about it. I'm just Joe Sixpack out there. I'm just trying to live my life. I'm trying to run a business. I'm trying to do, just live a life. Just one parting shot that gives me warm and fuzzy, and why data is important for me.
Well, data for me is in a sense the objective evidence about something that's going on. And if we're going to get sort of beyond the subjectivity of a lot of things that we may feel in the world today, sort of pay more attention to the things that are observable facts. I don't mean facts that people state, but things that you can actually measure, and from that, try to be more objective. And so I think what's happening for us is that it's almost like a bifurcation. There's a lot of people who are being very evidence and data driven, and some that maybe feel more like I don't want to go that way, because I've always, my gut feeling has always been right, or something like that.
Right.
And so I think we need to find sort of that common ground where you can have both. What is the evidence telling us? Now, again, you can make decisions regardless either way, but I think we're getting to more sort of evidence-based, objective measurement of everything that's happening in the world. I think that's what digital transformation means, is that we sort of have digital signals emanating from just about every process, person, product, and thing in the world. And as much as we can get objective evidence out of those things, as what is the next best thing, excuse me, the next best thing to do or to think about or to decide, then I think we'll be on a better path, I think.
I agree with you. Bill, can you add to that? Give us a little parting shot.
And I'm not going to answer your question at all, Scott. I'm going to go a different path, which is typical. I think this conversation, if there's anything I want somebody to take away from the conversation we just had today, it's the power of learning. It's the power of embracing ambiguity, and it's the power of embracing this diversity of perspectives. The data is going to help us see things more clearly, but we're never going to be able to evolve as an organization or as a society if we're not looking at our ability as a group to look at that data from a whole bunch of different perspectives. There's a lot of noise in the data, and the signal in the data is very heavily defined by the use case you're going after. But what's of value in that data comes from different perspectives who look at this and say, well, that's a useful piece of information. Well, that's a useful piece. When you have these people bring this together, then you do come up with something that's better. So to me, it's all around this ambiguity, difference of perspectives, and the ability for us to continuously learn from the data, with telling us to get more data and learn more. It's going to be, this is the ultimate in job security, because learning never stops.
See, I'm now, I push back on some of the points in here and there throughout this conversation, right? But for me personally, when I hear what you guys are talking about, it's exciting. As a former owner of a big company, I am excited by it. I didn't have this ability back then, right? I didn't. But this is exciting stuff. And for me, I'm very optimistic, very bullish on the future and the future of businesses in general, because of what is available through big thinkers and great thinkers like yourself that are providing real valuable, long-term, resilient type of solutions that help make me a better business person, long-term success, whatever it might be. And to me, it's a comforting conversation. Yeah, there's challenges, but there's challenges with everything. I mean, I don't wake up without having challenges, but it's comforting to know that there's great and real innovative solutions out there that are just changing lives. I really appreciate it. Now, Kirk, let me just sort of swing over to your stat card on LinkedIn. I'm swinging over right now. If you're out on video, I'm swinging over. And I noticed that I've reached out to you. And it's still in pending mode. Now, I'm not sure if you're trying to block me, but I'm just looking at it, and it's still in pending mode. That's just data. Don't kill the messenger. It's just data. I'm just wondering if you're evaluating me. So that's one.
No,
but anyway,
that's a prime example of information overload. I literally have thousands of requests in my LinkedIn queue to connect with people.
I'll send you an email.
LinkedIn has a limit of 30,000 connections, so I've reached my limit, and there's nothing I can do about it. But I will find a way. I will find a way, Scott. I'll let you into the inner circle.
I'll make it a big deal. Did you know what happened to me? Dear readers.
No, you're going to learn just how boring my posts can be.
It doesn't, man. But you're out there, and I want to make sure you listeners out there, you need to go out to Kirk Bourne. That's KirkBorne, right? Go out there. Yeah. And I think you're going to probably have to put a little comment in there, put Booz Allen. You'll find him. Good-looking guy, flowing head of hair. Unmistakable right there. Anyway, reach out, and he's got great. I mean, you're out on Twitter, man. You're popping to Twitter.
I'm on Twitter, but I'm only 3/1000ths as famous as Taylor Swift, so I need more followers.
I'm following you.
Okay, there you go.
I'm doing my part. And Bill, I know that you're very active out there on LinkedIn, and I really appreciate it. So reach out. And this is our friend. Go out to, I think it's Bill. It's not William. I see William on your thing. Bill SCHMARZO. That's SCHMARZO. And just Well, you're probably the only Schmarzo out there. I think you are. So you're not going to have
There's a family of Schmarzo's out there, but we're all the same family. So
okay, never mind. So he's with Hitachi. Just slap that in. If you're having a hard time finding that good-looking Jed too, and you're active out there too as well. So if they want to reach out, find out more. I'm telling you, it's learning. I love your point there, Bill. It's about learning. And I mean, there's no excuse now. There's no excuse to not learn it. It's all out there.
It's fun, like you said.
Hell yeah.
It's fun. It's great to learn stuff and to be exposed to new things. Every day is an opportunity to learn something new. It's great.
And to Kirk's point, it's happening fast, right? And so you can't let up on the gas. You got to keep on going. And like for me, I'm just soaking in the knowledge, man. I just sit here and just soak in the knowledge. I could be the dumbest, right? Knife in the drawer, the dullest knife, the butter knife. But man, I'm just getting the best education because I get to interview great people like you.
Well, we have you fooled, then, don't we?
Hey, yeah, we do this. Kirk, right there. Thank you very much for joining the Industrial Talk Podcast. And you, SCHMARZO, again, thank you very much for joining the Industrial Talk Podcast. You listeners out there, do not go away because we are going to be right back. And you're going to wrap it up, so you're not going to want to go away. So stay tuned. We're going to be back in just a jiffy.
You're listening to the Industrial Talk Podcast Network.
All right. Thank you again for joining the Industrial Talk Podcast, a platform that is solely dedicated to you, the industrial and manufacturing professionals that get it done. We celebrate you each. Oh my God, we do podcasts every day. That's what we say. We celebrate you all the time because you deserve it, because you're changing my life and you're changing the lives around the world. Woo! Now that, listeners, was a great conversation. That was absolutely insightful. You need to reach out to Bill SCHMARZO. You will have all his contact information out on the Industrial Talk Podcast landing page, website, wherever you want to go. That's industrialtalk.com, as well as Kirk Bourne. They see the world, and the world is bright. I'm just telling you, they're very excited about what can be done by leveraging data, the data analytics, and making companies, manufacturers far more successful because they are out there just doing great work with data and thinking ways of making you a success. That's what they're all about. All right, a couple of things. Once again, you're going to go out to industrialtalk.com. Yes, check. You're also going to go and you're going to sign up for the Adapting to the Coronavirus Supply Chain Disruption, the webinar. Find out more. You gotta keep learning, right? You just gotta keep learning. And the other one that we're just gonna have to make sure that you make it a point. Bill's gonna be hosting it, and that is delivering on bottom line. Realize the economic value of data. He talked about it here in this particular podcast, and that is going to be September 23rd. And then the other one is Speed, Discovery, Comprehension, and Trust in Data at Scale. Boy, keep learning. Because once again, you need to collaborate, you need to innovate, you need to educate, and you need to do it with a sense of speed and purpose. Do not lollygag. We can't have you lollygag. All right, we're going to have another great interview right around the corner. Be bold, be brave, dare greatly, change the world, hang out with people who are bold, brave, and dare greatly. Your view on life will be completely different. That's what we do here on the Industrial Talk Podcast. Adios, and thank you very much for joining, and we will be back with another great interview.